What if I told you that in 2022, the United States exchanged over US $919 billion in goods with Canada, the backbone of one of the world's most trusted economic alliances, and now that alliance is teetering on the edge of collapse? Imagine a world where aggressive tariffs and explosive political rhetoric threaten to shatter decades of cooperation overnight. This isn't a far-fetched scenario, it's the emerging reality that could redefine North American trade as we know it. Today, we're diving into a high-stakes showdown between Canada and the United States, a conflict with the potential to send shockwaves through economies on both sides of the border. In 2024, U.S. exports to Canada were valued at approximately $349.4 billion, while imports from Canada reached around $412.7 billion, forming a trade relationship that has long underpinned the prosperity of both nations. Stay tuned, because the truth behind these staggering statistics might just change the way you view global economic alliances forever. Chapter 1. The Threat of Tariffs, a Political and Economic Battle. In early 2025, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau found himself once again on the defensive as U.S. President Donald Trump issued fresh threats of tariffs on Canadian goods. These tariffs were part of Trump's broader trade war tactics, exacerbating an already tense situation. Trudeau wasted no time responding, stating that Canada would strike back hard if the tariffs were imposed. At the core of this dispute are Trump's accusations that Canada is a source of fentanyl entering the U.S., which has been exacerbating the opioid crisis. Trump's administration cited this as justification for tariffs on Canadian goods. However, Trudeau emphasized that less than 1% of fentanyl entering the U.S. comes from Canada, and his government has already invested over $1.3 billion in border security to tackle the problem. But the impact of these tariffs goes beyond drug trafficking concerns. Canada is the largest buyer of U.S. goods, with trade worth $356.5 billion in 2022, making it America's largest export market. The imposition of tariffs, especially on key exports like lumber, dairy, and automobiles, could harm both countries. For instance, Canada's imports of U.S. steel products rose sharply in June 2018, increasing by 31.3%, but then declined steeply by 38.3% in July 2018 after Canada implemented retaliatory tariffs. This suggests that the new tariffs could lead to even greater economic damage. For Canadians, these tariffs would likely lead to higher prices for everyday goods. If tariffs are imposed on Canadian imports like cars, electronics, and machinery, Canadians could see a rise in the cost of these products. For example, auto prices could rise by 5–10%, making cars more expensive for average consumers. On the flip side, Americans could also feel the pinch. A rise in Canadian prices for U.S. products would push up the cost of living on both sides of the border. If lumber tariffs are reintroduced, home construction costs in both countries would skyrocket, potentially slowing down housing markets. Chapter 2. The Backlash in Canada, Unity Against Trump's Aggression. While Trump escalates tensions, the Canadian response has been unified and resolute. Trudeau has repeatedly stated that Canada will protect its interests and sovereignty, and his speeches have rallied Canadians to stand up against Trump's aggressive policies. Canadian Member of Parliament MP Charlie Angus summed up the public sentiment perfectly when he referred to Trump as a convicted felon and a sexual predator who has turned what could have been a friendly hockey rivalry into a hate fest. His rhetoric reflects widespread frustration across the country. A 2025 Ipsos poll found that 68% of Canadians now hold a more negative perception of the United States, driven by President Trump's confrontational stance towards Canada. Even ordinary citizens, including senior citizens, have expressed their willingness to stand up against Trump's bullying, demonstrating a shift in Canadian resolve. Canadians have expressed their desire to assert their national pride and independence. A growing number of citizens, including grandmothers, have vowed to resist any attempts by Trump to push them around. This collective defiance is reshaping the social and political landscape of Canada. For everyday Canadians, this backlash has led to a rise in nationalist pride. More Canadians are opting for locally produced goods over American imports, impacting retail and local businesses. People are more likely to support Canadian-made products even if they cost a little more, as a form of protest. This growing cultural resistance could also lead to increased social media movements and community efforts to avoid spending money on American businesses, which may affect local shops that rely on cross-border trade. Chapter 3. Pierre Poilievre's conservative connection to Trump. While the majority of Canadians are aligned with Trudeau's opposition to Trump, some notable exceptions exist within Canada's Conservative Party. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, has been accused of aligning himself too closely with Trump, adopting the rhetoric of populism that defines the Make America Great Again MAGA movement. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, criticized Poilievre for worshiping Trump. Carney, a potential future leader of the Liberal Party, warned that Poilievre's MAGA-friendly policies could harm Canada's long-term interests. However, as public opinion shifts, especially with growing opposition to Trump, Poilievre's political future could be at risk. A July 2024 Angus Reid Institute survey revealed that a majority of Canadians felt a second Trump term would be detrimental to Canada, with many describing it as bad or terrible. If Poilievre continues to align himself with Trump, it could alienate the very electorate he needs to win the next election. For ordinary Canadians, Poilievre's alignment with Trump could create an environment of political instability. If Poilievre gains more influence, Canadians may feel the political landscape shifting, especially in more conservative regions. Canadians who oppose Trump's policies might find themselves alienated by policies that reflect American nationalism rather than Canadian sovereignty. This political tension could trickle down to local elections, community organizing, and how people perceive their national identity. Chapter 4. The economic consequences. A potential economic war. The potential fallout from tariffs could be catastrophic for both Canada and the U.S. economy. Key industries like lumber, dairy, and automotive manufacturing in Canada could face severe losses if tariffs are imposed. Canadian businesses are already beginning to prepare for the worst. In 2024, U.S. exports to Canada accounted for 16.6% of all U.S. goods exports. The automotive sector alone, which is worth $87.1 billion, could see significant disruptions, especially if tariffs on Canadian vehicles are introduced. Furthermore, Canada is the largest importer of U.S. dairy, accounting for 13.9% of total U.S. dairy exports in 2023. A tariff on Canadian dairy would further harm the already struggling U.S. dairy industry. This economic strain isn't just hypothetical. In a survey by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business (CFIB), 18% of small and medium-sized enterprises (SMEs) and 34% of exporters have experienced canceled or delayed orders due to the U.S.-Canada tariff situation. For consumers, rising costs of dairy, automobiles, and other goods would be unavoidable. Canadians would see a direct increase in their grocery bills and a higher cost of purchasing a vehicle or home. On the U.S. side, farmers and small businesses that depend on Canadian exports could face steep losses, leading to job cuts and higher prices for consumers in the U.S. These higher costs could lead to increased inflation, affecting everyday Americans' purchasing power. Chapter 5. Canada's growing resistance. A boycott of American products. The economic backlash against the U.S. has taken on a cultural and consumer-based form in Canada. A growing number of Canadians are opting to avoid American products altogether. In 2025, a survey by the Angus Reid Institute revealed that 85% of Canadians had either already replaced or planned to replace U.S. products with Canadian alternatives. This consumer shift is particularly critical for industries like tourism and retail, both of which rely heavily on Canadian consumers. In 2024, Canadian tourists spent over $6.4 billion in the U.S. If just 10% of Canadians reduce their travel to the U.S., the American tourism industry could lose $640 million. Given the current political climate, this loss could be even larger. The U.S. travel industry is already feeling the impact, with a 2023 U.S. Travel Association report warning that a boycott could cost the U.S. billions if it gains significant momentum. For Canadians, a consumer boycott means making more conscious decisions about what to buy From avoiding American brands at the store to choosing Canadian destinations for vacations, everyday citizens may also see an uptick in local Canadian businesses that thrive on this newfound nationalism. Conversely, American businesses reliant on Canadian tourists or consumers might feel the strain, especially in retail and hospitality, where border-crossing tourism plays a vital role. Looking ahead, the trajectory of U.S.-Canada relations remains uncertain. The 2024 U.S. elections could bring a shift in U.S. leadership, with Joe Biden or another Democrat potentially altering foreign policy. If Trump remains in power, Canada's resolve to resist tariffs will continue. The critical question is whether Canada's economic resilience and political unity can withstand further aggression. The U.S.-Canada relationship is at a pivotal point. Tariffs, political divides, and a growing boycott of American products are reshaping the landscape. As tensions rise, the world is watching to see how these two neighboring nations will navigate this complex and often turbulent relationship. One thing is clear: Canada is standing firm, united in resistance against Trump's aggressive tactics. The question remains: will the relationship improve or continue to deteriorate under the pressure of tariffs and economic retaliation? Only time will tell.